and welcome to this episode of The Nerd Tea. I am here with Melissa Albert. Hello, how are you?
Hey, Stephanie, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. So, Melissa, you are obviously you're a YA author. You've written four novels. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Melissa Albert. I am the author of the Hazelwood books, which are the Hazelwood, the Night Country, and Tales from the Hinterland, which is about fairy tales and it has like a noir vibe and it's like a portal fantasy, which is one of my favorite things. And then I am the author of the standalone Our Crooked Hearts, which is kind of my love story to my own self in the 90s when I was like an aspiring teen witch. So teen witch vibes, 90s vibes, set half in Chicago, half in the suburbs of Illinois. And then my new book is The Bad Ones, which is here. And I love this cover.
It is such a beautiful cover.
Thank you. Yeah, so this one came out a few months ago, and I can give you the pitch if you want.
Yes, absolutely. Give me your best elevator pitch.
Angsting about this. Okay, so The Bad Ones is about a suburb in which four seemingly unrelated people go missing across a single night. And the estranged best friend of one of them missing has to set out to discover what happened to her best friend, whether she is a victim of something or a perpetrator or something else entirely, and what her hidden connection is to the other missing people. And in order to kind of solve these mysteries, she has to dig into their own past, which is a place full of art and a secret history of vengeance and an art project in which they created a pantheon of goddesses to kind of do their will for them, as well as uncover the hidden kind of occult history of the suburb in which they live. And this book has a lot to do with my love of like David Lynch. I loved when I was a teenager watching Blue Velvet, kind of that idea of the shiny surface of a place being like scratched away to reveal something very scary underneath. I've kind of held that in my mind for a very long time. And I finally got to put some of that energy into this book. It's also my love story to those really, really intense female friendships that you can have throughout your life, but that burn, I think, really, really brightly and intensely when you're young.
That was the perfect elevator pitch, and you actually touched on so many things. It's like so many questions I had that I was like, ooh, I should rearrange my questions and ask her this first. And then you said something else. I was, no, let me ask her this first. So I was like,
all your questions, any
all
order.
my questions. No, honestly, because you touched on so many of the things that I found really interesting about the book. But let me sort of back up a little bit. You talked about the inspiration of what you had seen, but is there anything that you were inspired by in general, just like besides the watching, what was the show?
Oh, Blue Velvet.
The Blue Velvet, yeah. Was there any other like inspiration that you're like actually, because you have goddess elements and like you said friendship elements and like spooky elements, so I want to know what sort of inspired it all.
So I think one of the first, I was born and came of age a little bit before YA had like that explosion of like amazing books and authors in like the early aughts. So like when I was a teenager, Holly Black wasn't publishing and like Cassandra Clare wasn't publishing and John Green, etc. So one of the first, I would say, genuinely young adult authors I discovered was Francesca Lia Block. And my dad came home, he asked the librarian, he was like, I have like a spooky beatnik daughter, what do I do with her, book-wise? And he came home with a story collection called Girl Goddess Number 9. And it's got a number of influences, but one of them is like about teen girls and mythology. And like when you're young, kind of the places you find like these power narratives, I think, become really meaningful to you, and you can kind of like weave them into your sense of yourself. And reading that collection, I like longed for friendships like that, and I longed for kind of access to like magic and ritual like that. And that was very, very much an influence that I almost like forgot about until I was writing this book, because I went on to read all of Block's work and love her dearly. She was like a huge literary presence in my teen years. But yeah, that's definitely one that's like stayed in my mind and that kind of, I guess, came to the surface. And another thing that's interested in me for a long time, speaking of Holly Black, a few years back I read her book Dull Bones, which is a middle grade novel,
Okay.
and it captures really beautifully something that I'm interested in, which is like that moment when a child or a young person is supposed to put aside imaginary play and like become serious and like grow up and care
Mhm.
about dating or whatever. And like, what about the kids who aren't ready, like when their peers are? So within the friendship story and the bad ones, I kind of was interested in writing a friendship where one person is like looking ahead with excitement and the other is like holding back and still wanting to be young and make magic and just exploring kind of like the tension of that moment when a friendship is like
Right.
at that crossroads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what you said about that because I think I was definitely that friend that was stayed in the imaginary a
Yeah.
little bit longer than some of my other
Yeah.
friends, and
A
it was
lot of us.
weird.
A
Yeah, I
lot of
feel
us
like a lot
were.
of us, like young readers, were like that because we
Mhm.
were constantly using imagination. We were constantly in this other world, and it was weird when it was all of a sudden not like, I don't know, not right, quote unquote. You know?
Yeah, not like allowable or
Yeah,
cool or yeah,
definitely.
or
It's
something
like
you
childish
realize,
for some reason.
yeah, something you had to hide. That was like
Yeah.
a painful moment.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I definitely connected to this where you're just like, you feel like, well, why is it all of a sudden not okay to have like these interests? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm like, I'm supposed to date? No.
Yeah. First of all, no.
No,
No,
thank
please.
you. Yeah.
Also love that you had this in a small town setting. It was very like Stranger Things vibe with like they were riding their bikes and like playing in
Hmm.
the woods, and I definitely love that. And I want to know if you seemed to really know the dynamics of a small town, and I want to know,
Hmm.
was that something that was inspired in your personal life?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yeah. So I grew up in I was born in Chicago, but then I grew up in the suburbs. And I feel like this book, as well as Our Crooked Hearts, were like pretty distinctly for me my attempts to write a very like suburban fantasy. So, like, not just small town, but like chain stores and like strip malls, something. So just that stuff that's specific to growing up in a kind of blandly manicured place and trying to find places you can like make wild by
Mm-hmm.
just being there with your friends and reimagining them, or like going to places you're not supposed to be, or just, I don't know, having a party in the mall parking lot at night, like when no one's around. Just
Yeah.
kind of that idea of having to make your own fun and make your own magic. And there's also just, I live in a city now. I'm in New York. So I feel like everyone's lives are kind of like, you see more of people's lives maybe than you necessarily want to.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the suburbs, there's so much that is hidden and so much that you can keep hidden. And there's like a lot of interesting possibilities in that. In the idea of like all of these hidden lives going on behind like the identical house fronts. Like
Yeah,
when you
everything
go to the
seemingly
suburbs,
perfect. Yeah.
yeah, you have like a kind of house and you go into someone else's house and you'll be like, oh, you have the same exact house as me, but like filled with different things. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
creepy. That's weird. So yeah, I think the suburbs are full of spooky, uncanny narrative possibilities that I have fun playing with.
Yeah, I totally get that. That whole vibe where you go to someone's house and you know where their bathroom is. You just
Yeah,
exactly know where their bathroom is.
but it like smells wrong, and maybe it
Yeah.
takes you like 10 minutes to be like, wait, I'm in a mirror world version of my house. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I know that world very well.
Are you also a suburban kid?
Yeah, I was born in the city,
Okay.
in Caracas, Venezuela, but moved to the suburbs later on. So I definitely know that vibe where it's like the sleepy, like the lawn is manicured the exact same way, like that.
And it's like the
Yeah.
sound, like the spooky sound of the.
Yes, that whole vibe. It's like everyone is like Pleasantville almost.
Or the one that always comes up is Camazotz. Do you remember in A Wrinkle in Time when all the
Oh
kids are
yes,
bouncing the ball? I think about that
yes.
a lot. Yeah, I
Okay, that's also yes the vibe.
it's a mood.
Actually, speaking of vibes and moods, perfect
Ooh,
transition.
thank you. Yeah.
I actually want to talk because I've noticed a lot of interesting recurring themes in across your books.
Mhm.
So really quickly, I want to just give a brief synopsis, or I want you to give a brief synopsis
Mhm.
of the Hazel Woods and our
Oh, my
Crooked
favorite
Hearts.
book.
Yeah,
Um,
just so that I can talk about the themes that I see in all of your books and people kind
yeah.
of know what you're talking about.
Okay, it's been a really long time since I've done this, so forgive me. So The Hazelwood is a book about a girl whose grandmother was the author of a collection of fairy tales that, against all odds, became kind of a cult fascination piece of literature. It's long been out of print and it's impossible to find, but like this kind of cult of personality remains. And there's this diehard group of people who are always trying to track down the book and read it. And there's weird rumors around it. All these years later, the grandmother is sequestered up in her big house called the Hazelwood, taking no guests, completely estranged from her daughter and her granddaughter, who's the heroine of the book, Alice. All of Alice's life, she and her mother have been on the run from something. Alice doesn't know what. She doesn't know why they're always on the move. But they're always kind of followed by bad luck. And every time a bad luck incident occurs, her mother moves her again. And then her grandmother dies. And her mother says, "We can finally stand still." And they do. And then the bad luck comes back with a vengeance. And Alice, over the course of two books, discovers, I won't give away too much in case I can spoil someone,
Yeah.
6 years later. Um, but basically, the world behind her grandmother's fairy tales is real, and it is out to get her. And then a portal fantasy ensues, which, as I mentioned, is my favorite thing. And then in book two, The Night Country, fairy tale characters are alive and well in New York City, causing havoc, attempting to exert their gnarly fairy tale ways on the real world. So that's the Hazelwood books. And then Our Crooked Hearts is the story of a girl named Ivy, who her mother has kind of kept her at arm's length for a very long time, and she doesn't understand why. And then one night she's driving home with a soon to be ex boyfriend when suddenly in their headlights there is a nude woman in the middle of the road. And she thinks she hears this woman saying her name, though they've never met. And once again, a string of uncanny and disturbing events ensues. And in flashback, we see that everything that is happening to Ivy has everything to do with her mother's teen years in 1990 Chicago, in which she becomes a witch and does some dark and terrible things that reverberate 25 years later. And then their two narratives kind of collide in the present day. I
Love.
hope that was
No,
okay.
that was fantastic. Like literally, as you were going, I was like, yep, that's it. That's exactly it.
Okay.
And you definitely touched on some of the themes that I want to touch on. The first one is that in all of your stories, as you mentioned, there is this lore, this
Hmm.
secret, this sort of thing that people know but don't know that is happening around them. These kind of like weird coincidence. You talk about secret in magic here. You talk about fairy tales. You talk about a kind of interesting game that is made up that seemingly is also sort of connected to other games that are kind of made up.
I actually forgot to mention in my whole
Did
pitch on
you?
that was the Goddess game.
Did you? Okay, well, let's mention
I
that first.
mentioned it.
Yeah. Did
I'll
you
just
forget?
quickly say the plot
Yeah.
of this book also revolves around something called the Goddess Game, which is kind of like a
Hmm.
Bloody Mary esque slumber party game played only by the girls of this suburb. And the origins of the game, as well as the history our heroine has in playing it, has a lot to do with the plot of the book. And yet I entirely forgot that when describing it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Oh well.
No, but it's fine. That's why I'm wearing. I told you this earlier, but that's why I'm wearing my goddess necklace because I was like,
That's
what?
awesome.
Yes, but what I like about it is that you do introduce a lot of these sort of passed down stories and secrets, and
Mhm.
I want to know what is the interest in that, and why do you focus like your story so much in like lore, in that way?
Ooh. I mean, I guess it comes just from my interest in. Okay, so I just love. I used to want to be a music journalist, and I used to
Huh.
love tracing a band backward. like who are they inspired by, and who are they inspired by, and who are they, like all the way back to the beginning of like recorded music and before. And I think it's fun to do the same thing with stories. Like you can read a totally pure, bare, old origin text of like a fairy tale, and then you can read like a retelling of that fairy tale, and then you can read like a modern kind of take of those tropes of that fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
So I just love the way a story can be so oh, what's the word, primal, and
Mm-hmm.
then like kind of explode out from there in like a million different ways. I find that really interesting. I'm also kind of obsessed with hyper local mythology.
Okay.
So, the idea of a suburb where there is a game attached to a story, and because only the people in this town play it, like, what is that? What is the true history behind it?
Mm-hmm.
I love that feeling of living somewhere, and when you have like a visitor, there's like something weird about the way you live, or like something in your town that you totally take for granted that people with fresh eyes see as something like totally strange, and you never
Yeah.
saw it that way. Um, I don't think I've written anything that could be classified as folk horror. Like maybe this Bad Ones would come the closest, but I find it really fun, and I feel like I'm kind of like dancing around the edges of that. So just like that feeling of being in a place that looks familiar,
Mm-hmm.
and then slowly one strange thing after another kind of takes you to a different place, and makes you realize the nature of where you thought you were is a little different.
What I like about that is exactly what you said, where it's like it's very specific, and you have that very specific here with, oh, it's only in this town. You also have it in the Hazelwoods, which like only the select few who
Mhm.
manage to get their hands on this book know exactly what's in it, and it's sort of this game of telephone, and it starts taking
Ooh,
on a
totally.
world of its own, because at that point
Yeah.
it's just being passed around by word of mouth in
I
that
love
way.
that game of telephone. I
Yeah.
think right now there's like a rise in interest in something I just love, which is books about spooky pop culture. So like the Hazelwood. Like
Yeah.
I think there's like a lot of books coming out or recently come out about like cursed horror movies, for instance, which I
Yes.
love. Um, yeah, I love also just fandoms, like the culture that pops up around an existing thing, where the thing
Yes.
almost becomes,
Its own thing.
yeah, like it's separate from
Hmm.
the thing itself. I kind of love that too.
Yeah. All right. So another awesome theme that I love from your stories is your there's I notice a lot of two types of relationships that you have. You have a lot of the mother daughter duo that is,
Mhm.
they're very like, they there's something that separates them. You have a lot of that. You have it in Our Crooked Hearts, and you have it in the Hazelwoods, and you also touch on, like you said earlier, that sort of almost toxic codependent friendships that you have.
Right.
And you definitely had it in the flashbacks in Our Crooked Hearts. You definitely have it in the Bad Ones. So I want to talk a little bit about that, starting with the mother-daughter duo and that interest in, specifically with moms and daughters, not necessarily with the fathers or the siblings, and that, so but specifically that mother-daughter duo.
Yeah. Okay. So in the Hazelwood, it seemed obvious to me in writing a fairy tale inspired book that the matrilineal line is of importance in fairy tales. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, the kings and the fathers are always feckless and foolish. So they're like, my wife said I have to cut off your head, so I guess I will. Like this, or like my
Yeah.
mother told me I had to murder you, wife. Like whatever it is. The women are, it's kind of like the song Jolene. Like the women work it out with the man somewhere over here. He's not really, he's not calling the shots. So that was kind of what informed the Hazelwood. And then when I wrote Our Crooked Hearts, interestingly, I don't have a daughter, I have a son. And I wrote that book during the pandemic, during a time of high, high parental anxiety. He was
Mm-hmm.
like very small. And that was like the most joyful writing experience of my life, because the world was not where I wanted my brain to live, but like I could live in fiction, and it was just like such a release. but I think a lot of anxiety went into it. And in Our Crooked Hearts, the 90s thread with the mother,
Mm-hmm.
finding out what she did and finding out how that informs her daughter's life and how choices she makes it impossible for them to be close and fill her with shame. I think that was less me writing as a daughter, the way
Mm-hmm.
I did. I was in a daughter's perspective because I was not a parent when I wrote the Hazelwood books, but or at least the first one. But yeah, writing from the perspective of a mother, and I think I feel really really close to that book because of
Yeah.
what I put in it, like that was important to me and sort of animating me at that time. So yeah, it started out as a celebration of fairy tale tropes, and then
Mm-hmm.
in the Crooked Hearts, where I feel like it almost kind of I'm like, oh, this is like a theme of my work. Even I can see that, and I think often authors are not able to see what they're doing until someone tells them. But even I can tell
Yeah.
that this is something that keeps coming up. So yeah, that was like kind of the two approaches on that theme. And it was funny. I find when I've stopped writing a book and I'm writing a new one, there's almost like a hangover effect. Or I
Yes.
feel like I've just been through a divorce and now I'm like
Okay.
dating again. And I keep saying in jokes from my last relationship to like my new partner. I don't know if this metaphor is totally fallen apart now. But as I was writing the bad ones, I kept being like, and then the mom's secret life. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not this book.
Yeah.
I am not. So it like took me some time to exercise
Yeah. That.
desire to make the mothers super relevant.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely, it's not about them. It is about the people we see on the page. Um, but yeah, I hope that
Yeah.
answered your question. Those were like the two places I came from kind of in writing about that.
Definitely. And I actually love that you said that how it's different from before you're a mother to after. Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, especially in YA, we're all guilty of this. We want the parents out of the way so that we can like
It's so
have
good.
the because that way it's like um they can do whatever they want without being like you're grounded. It's like, well, crap. Like, like the realistic expectations of like, well, you have homework. Like you can't just like go gallivanting around. But I love that in Our Crooked Hearts we get to see the fact that the mom was a kid, which is like
Yeah.
logical. It's like no duh, but like you really get to see the mom was a kid herself, like a teenager herself.
I initially was gonna give her a little bit of page time where she just like told her daughter some things,
Yeah.
but then I became so addicted to writing about Chicago in the 90s
Yeah.
and also to the notion of allowing a parent to explain themselves on the page.
Hmm.
Like I just I needed her to have like a villain POV. Not like villain exactly, but
Villainish.
she needed more to explain her decisions.
Yeah, and I do love how it's not like she's not a bad mom. She's a flawed mom.
She's a compromised, flawed mom. Yeah.
Yes. Which
Mhm.
is, I love that because we get the moment every teenager at some point discovers that when their parents are not perfect.
Human.
You
Yeah.
know?
hmm And it's like,
Yeah, it's like, I'm sorry,
like,
what?
I
You don't
know
have.
you had a life before
Okay,
me.
okay.
Like that's deeply offensive.
Yes, it's like
That's
teachers who do
embarrassing.
stuff outside school. You're like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Yeah. I don't.
um,
It's
yeah,
like the Truman Show is not. This is
it's
not
not.
my life.
Yes, literally, literally. The other relationship that you explore, and this is the relationship you touched on it in the Crooked Hearts went with the
hmm
mom, but this is the relationship in the bad ones. It's
hmm
that like toxic codependent almost
Yeah.
semi-toxic codependent like friendships. It gives me Jennifer's Bodies vibes.
Ooh.
It
Okay.
does. And I want to know because they're not like you're not portraying the typical the good kid and the bad kid. That's not
Right.
necessarily what the story is about, but it is like you said earlier that moment where it's the crossroads and
Yeah.
whether you allow it or not, whether you do go off to where you want to go, or you stay in this path where it's been safe, and where it was at some point maybe what made your childhood good for you. Do you stray from that, or do you stay on this path? And I want to talk about it because I'm so interested in that relationship.
Oh no, I am too. I mean, I've really lived on both sides of that. And I've been the dumped in like friendship breakups. And I can't decide what is more formative and painful, being dumped or having like a slow motion fade away.
Yeah.
But few relationships, romantically speaking, unless we're talking like there's kids in the picture and you know you're a grown person, but like as a young person, what breakup could be more painful than the loss of like a friend?
Yeah.
Because it's not a rejection of you romantically, it's a rejection of like everything you are. And it's tremendously painful and it's unavoidable. But when like a friendship at that age is working, it's just so heady. You know,
Yeah.
it's like
It's all consuming.
it's all consuming and it's that taste, you know, like as you grow up, it's like these tastes of like freedom
Mm-hmm.
and just finding those tastes of freedom like with someone, like making those secret worlds and like for the first time in your life having not just like secrets but like a whole world your parents don't know about,
Mm-hmm.
like full of a language they don't speak and like a culture they don't share and like jokes they don't understand. It's wild and it lives side by side with your normal life. And I'll look back at like my teen years and I'll remember like nights I had with my friends. And then I'll think like, well, I was this age and at like a week later, I was with my family at like a family vacation or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they just occupy such different spaces in my head. And there's just like this fiery twilight kind of magic to my teen friendships. And I'm still I'm lucky to be still friends with a lot of these people. But it's different. Like you have lives, and I don't know. There's just like a magic to it, and I think it's honestly one of the best things about writing for teens and writing in the young adult space. And I've read a lot of wonderful. I'm reading Mona Awad's Bunny right now.
Mm-hmm.
People have been telling me to read it like ever since Crooked Hearts came out. I've
Yeah.
been reading it, and it's like a real amazing kind of adult female friendship story. But I feel like there's just something about those teen years
Yeah.
friendships that are different. It's just different.
Yeah, and you in this one, in the bad ones especially, I like because you explore the friendship the protagonist has with the friend that is missing.
Hmm.
And that is the friend that knows you from when you are young. They know
Yeah.
how you went from point A to point B. They were there through it all. But you
For
also,
better or worse. Yeah.
yeah, for better or worse, they know it all. But you also have our protagonist meet new friends, and she comes to the realization at some point, I won't spoil or anything, but she comes to the realization at some point that she didn't realize her new friends were her new friends also.
Hmm.
Like, it was almost like she didn't realize she could have other friendships. And so
Yeah.
I do also enjoy that dynamic of, here's a person who's known you and knows from when you were little, but here are the people who know you now. And,
Yeah.
you know,
And what are you allowed to be? Like,
yeah,
if your old friend is there, are you allowed to be this new person, or will you look like an embarrassing fake?
yeah.
Um,
And who
are you
even is this
allowed
new person?
to change? Yeah. And it's like that. That's another interesting thing. Like for all the like power and amazingness of these friendships, there's also always a little bit of there's like a power dynamic. I
Hmm.
would say not always, but
You definitely
often
explore that in
it's
Bad Ones
some
and Cricket Hearts, yeah.
because I would say like my two heroines would probably each believe the other held more power than they did,
Yes.
um, which I find interesting as well.
But yeah, it's interesting because then in the other side, we peek through that the other person feels that they're somehow also lacking. And so it's
Yes.
funny to me that both people are not viewing each other in that positive light that the other one
Yeah.
is viewing them.
Yeah, exactly. Like loving, and it's just like that thing when you know someone so well, you know what they're going to do, you know what they're going to
Yes.
say. Or maybe you like don't give them the benefit of the doubt and
Hmm.
you imagine things worse than they will be. But it's just like familiarity breeding contempt, breeding
Hmm.
love, breeding like constriction. It's hard to grow up. And
Yes.
everyone does it at different speeds, and that's just really fun to write about.
Yeah, and you do it so well. You're
Thank
so
you.
magical. And that actually is a great transition. You did this to me twice, so thank you for that.
You got it.
This is a great transition. I want to talk about your writing style because I love your writing style. It is so vivid. You describe everything like I know exactly what it's like to grow in a small town suburb. I know exactly what it's like to grow in a big city. I know exactly what it's like to grow like you just make it so vivid that there's no way to not put yourself there. And one of the things you do is you make these books spooky as hell. um, like I will tell you that that when I was reading what was it? I believe it was the Hazel Woods. I realized at some point I was alone. It was dark. I had the blinds open. Um and
Scary to know what you're reading.
I literally was like so in it, and then all of a sudden I was like I'm scared. Like legitimately, I was like, I am actually scared. Like I had to get up and turn, like close the blinds, turn on the lights. Like I was like, I feel watched. like, but
I
I
was watching you. I'm so sorry. I do that
literally,
when
I was
people read the
like,
Hazelwood. No, just kidding.
I did. No, it really did feel. I was like, is someone staring at me through the window right
Open
now?
blinds at night are not, they're a no go. I used to like babysit these people with big glass doors with no cover.
Oh no,
And I'd
no,
sit on
no.
the couch with glass doors, glass door here, reading the Sandman comics.
Oh no.
Like,
Oh no.
it
No.
was,
Like those
I
mod,
never
you know, the
formative
modern houses
experience. Yeah.
the that are like all glass, and you're just like nah. Like I can't.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah.
No, it that's exactly how the house was in When a Stranger Calls. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
Oh God. No. I I
Like
can
literally.
read books with those themes, but I can't. Home invasion movies are not for me.
No, I saw it by accident. I did not.
Okay.
Does I do
Once
not.
watched Carrie by accident. I was like
Yeah, I do
10.
not. I do not. I think your books are probably the scariest that I go because they're more like creepy,
They're not,
unnerving.
yeah. Yeah. They're not too
Yeah.
scary.
But anything other than that, I'm like, no, thank you. I'd like to sleep.
Yeah, I'm with
I
you.
appreciate that. You, like I said, you sort of have this creepy vibe to you. You have a lot of like secrets that you trickle in. I
Hmm.
want to know what the planning process is to that. To make sure that it's like creepy and mysterious, but you're not, and you're kind of keeping the vibe throughout that whole book.
Okay. I regret to inform you
Oh no!
that I 100%, I'm like, what if I put a spooky thing and I don't know what the hell it's going to be? And then, like, I just love to, like, okay, as a reader,
Hmm.
I keep going to find out what happens next. And I love
Yeah.
a book that as you're reading, there's like one big question, but there's also like 20 little questions.
Hmm.
Like, who was that phone call? And like, what is the thing that she found in her pocket? You know, like whatever, little mysteries. So as I draft, I fill up my rough drafts with like little mysteries.
Mm.
And some of them come to fruition and turn into like the big answer. And then some, of course, have to be edited out. So I kind of write in order beginning to end without knowing what'll happen.
At
And
all? Like not even at the end? Like you just go?
the Night Country, I knew what the like penultimate, like I knew what the
Hmm.
like climactic thing would be. And that's why I was excited to write that book. Just knowing that. Otherwise, I don't know.
Huh?
And it's like slow, but it mimics the experience of being a reader, I feel.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works out so beautifully that I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, it's like that thing. I think it was George Saunders or Stephen King or someone saying some version of like, you're writing up here, but like hopefully down here, other things are happening and you're like subconscious and it'll come together into an ending. And sometimes it feels that way, and sometimes it feels like, okay, well, now I have like 200 pages of clutter that I
Yeah.
that I have to peel away. Um, but when I get to the ending, I find that I have often I the whole draft is like a scavenger hunt kind of, and it's full of
Mhm.
clues. And at the end, so far, the clues have come together into like an ending. So I'll
Yeah.
be like, I know the ending is in what I've written already, like it's here, and I just have to like pull it out. So
That
that's like my
is,
slow, messy, but for
yeah.
me, fun and like reader like
Yeah.
way of writing.
It is so interesting. I would have never guessed because to me, you do sort of bring in a little detail here and then sort of re-bring it back, but now you're like, but wait, there was something else. And you sort of like do this thing until the end. You're like, ah, yes,
I
of
mean,
course. You've been saying that from the beginning. And so I would have
definitely
thought, you know?
editing, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
also like sometimes I'll put something in for no reason, and then 100 pages later, it will answer a, a problem I've just discovered, which is
Okay.
feels really good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a mix of like serendipity and time and inefficiency.
Yeah.
Serendipity plus inefficiency.
Yeah.
It's a Melissa Albert system. Yeah.
I mean,
So yeah, and I hear other writers whose work I love and is full of magic and texture
mhm.
and surprises, saying they can map it beginning to end before they write. But
Yeah.
I've not. Every time I try that, I lose my urgency, and I am not able to. I just find myself dragging because I know what's
Yeah.
going to happen, so I don't care.
Interesting. I've tried to do it like your way when
Hmm.
I've tried writing stuff, and what happens is that like I feel like I get lost, and I'm like I I've lost you at some point. So like, how do you make sure that you? Is it because you feel like excited to find out what happens? So that's kind of what motivates you to keep writing.
Yeah, on the best days, it feels like excitement and like I want to keep writing just to know what's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. And then on harder days, it is also that feeling of where am I? Like, what have I written? It's
Yeah.
80,000 words long and I don't even remember. Like, so I will sometimes take a pause
Mm-hmm.
and mock up like a calendar and just be like, what's even happened day to day so far?
Yeah.
And try to like kind of look at it from the top down that way. And I have a million notes drafts going at all time, full of things like scenes that could happen, like
Mm-hmm.
things that could be in the ending. So there's like a lot of note taking that informs the end.
Gotcha. So would you say that your first draft or like your second draft are the ones that take you like that you're more involved in like the process and it takes you a little bit longer?
I also can't do like the nice, quick, drafty zero draft thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm very much dredged down in sentences from the beginning. This is
Mm.
so inefficient. As
Like
I'm
if it
talking,
works, it works though. You know, if it works, don't
advice
break
anyone
it.
should take.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I don't think I'm ever going to be like a book a year writer. I just
Yeah.
don't have that I just don't have that ability to plan and stay engaged
Yeah.
so far, but maybe one day that will change.
Like I said, if it's not broken, then
Working
don't fix
so
it.
far.
You also you use flashbacks to tell the story a lot, and you sort of trickle in that information. And originally, I was going to ask about the planning process of those. Now
Yeah.
I feel like, how do you know when to put in a flashback to sort of aid the story, but also not reveal too much before you're ready? for it.
Oh, yeah. Information reveal is so hard because you forget what the characters know and what the reader knows, and like
Yeah.
how to balance that. How do I do it? I can remember.
Actually.
I'll say the weirdest experience I had with that was with Our
Mhm.
Crooked Hearts when I was planning on making it one timeline with like the mother revealing some information in the present day in a conversation. And then that conversation was 20,000 words long and growing, and I was like, "Oh, this is a second timeline."
Mhm.
So, the dual timeline thing for me, once I like embraced it and have done it in other ways, that's been really refreshing to my mind because it feels like you're writing two books, kind of.
Yeah.
And when you're kind of bored or stuck in one narrative, you can push at the other. And I found that across all of my books. Like in the Hazelwood, there were two halves that are very distinct from each other, and there's
Mhm.
like fairy tales kind of put in there. And then my other books have had like dual timelines, other POVs. And I just think as a writer who's not able to jump around among projects the way some people do,
Mhm.
it's refreshing to have very different threads within one project. Um, Again, just to like stay engaged.
That is, I'm still shooketh. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm like, because for me, I'm like, wow, it's so perfect. And she must have such meticulous, like.
Thank you. I'm glad.
So
Not
love to
exciting.
know that. I also wanted to talk about the because you do the fairy tales and the magic and
Mm,
all of that and the goddess game and every bit of that. How do you? It's obviously magic. It's fantastical. It's
mhm.
in theory make believe, and
We don't know.
but they always have a sense of realness and grittiness to the, and I think that's what makes it so unnerving to
Mhm.
read because you're like it could happen, like
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, I love
So
that. Doesn't
how do you go about making sure it stays sort of grounded?
Yeah. Oh man. It's just what I love to read. I feel
Mhm.
like that's like the core answer. It's like I love to yeah, it all comes down to just like being a lifelong reader and what
Mhm.
has really really dug its hooks into me. I think about Lev Grossman's Magicians trilogy. I feel like a lot of, I don't know if you have this. I'd be curious to hear what yours is if you do. Like a particular text that you can always be inspired by. Like every time you read it, you're just like excited about like story in some
Yes.
way. And I feel like in that trilogy, that mix of it's like essentially a young man, not only is he becoming a magician, but he's also gaining entrance to the magical land behind his favorite fantasy book series. So it's like
Yes.
marrying two brilliant ideas. And then bringing into that the coming of age of a sort of unhappy, nihilistic young man that keeps it totally grounded. Like he's,
Yes.
miserable.
Yes. He's a black coffee drinker for sure.
Yeah, yeah. In the midst of magic, he's like
Yes.
learning to be able to embrace life or
Yeah.
whatever. But there's something about the it's very magical, but the magic is very a mix of like deep vein magic, like lore, like Arthurian and fairy tale and mythological, and then also just like the hard work of the human body, like
Mhm.
having to kind of pummel itself to like wring magic out of the air. I love that combination. So I'm always kind of like chasing that idea of magic with consequences, magic with
Yeah.
weight. In Our Crooked Hearts, I had to like figure out how witchcraft worked for me,
Mhm.
and that was a lot of fun. Figuring out how much would you have to give, how much would you have to like hurt, where would you buy your ingredients? Like if you're in Chicago, you'd go to
Yeah.
like the printer's row, or like you would go to harvest time, or just like I wanted it to be very grounded in reality because for me that makes it more the magic feels more real, the more
Yes.
detailed and the more um unmagical the things surrounding it, the more exciting the magic is to me.
Yes. I mean, like I said, you could definitely, you feel like you could literally start right now and be like, oh, I can do that same magic like right now. Yeah.
I
Like
was
maybe
the
not, but.
kid. I was the kid reading these books when I was
Mhm.
young, and being like, okay,
Yeah.
here's what I need. I can actually get these ingredients from my mom's garden. This is happening. So
Yeah.
yeah, I want to like recreate that feeling for readers if I can.
You definitely did. I had that series. I read a series when I was younger, and it was the same thing. It was lighter YA. It was like closer to middle grade. It was like that
Mhm.
sort of middle grade YA betweeny.
Okay.
But it also had like the herbs and the crystals, and I was like,
Yeah.
does that mean then like I can do it? Like,
Yeah.
you
I'm gonna
know.
go to the mall and I'm gonna
Yeah,
come and
right
do
now.
that.
I started going to Barnes and Noble. My mom was like freaked out. She's like, absolutely not. Whatever this
Oh,
is, like, no. I was like,
okay.
it's a book of spells. And she's like, no. Like,
I was not
what?
allowed to have tarot cards because
Yeah,
my mom has a respect. She has a respect for the occult.
yeah,
She didn't want me to not buy them because they were bullshit. She wanted me
yeah.
to not buy them like just in case. So same thing with Ouija board. So I
Oh
think
yeah,
like that kind of respect colored me too because I was like,
yeah,
so it's kind of like real maybe that was meaningful to me.
yeah. I think my mom was like, it's not real, but just in case,
Right.
like
Yeah.
you're not doing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just that I'm not messing with,
Yeah,
like,
like
I'm not
I don't think
summoning up a
so.
demon in my living room anyway. Yeah.
No, not at all. I also want to talk to you about you love to add, and you do this with your magic as well,
Mhm.
and you love to add this sort of minute details about if the floor was sticky when you walk into the diner,
Mhm.
or you paint a picture about like a random secondary character and you sort of tell us everything you know about that character without ever saying exactly what you need to know about that character. Like from
Mhm.
the way that they walked and smelled and the type of smile that they had. Um, you're letting us know a full backstory of someone who you will only see for 3 pages. And for me, what I love about that is that it makes the world fuller. It makes your
Mhm.
characters like really like, no, I live a full life, not just what you're reading in the story, but I've had a life before, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and I want to know how you make it so that these details become enriching and not superfluous and dragging the story.
Oh, well, I love that. Thank you for saying so. I, I think that's in reaction to a bad writerly tendency I have, which is often in first draft, my drafts are very, very interior
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not naturally the first thing I see is rarely character. The first thing I see is like mentally is like ideas like what if this
Mm-hmm.
happened in this like space. So like I'm very interested in like stuff and setting and then the people interest me slowly. I have to draft for a while before side characters are like it's like crisper, it's like quicker. But like the characters that I actually live with, it's like a slow kind of saturation. So first drafts, I'm always writing them walking around thinking, which is not
Okay, yeah.
terribly entertaining. So I'll find that once I do that enough, I know who they are, and then I can like do the thing you mentioned where it's not just like interior, it's like
Mm-hmm.
dialogue and like stickiness beneath shoes. So
Yeah.
it's like grounding them in a space and grounding them in a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's like something that I'm kind of with every book trying to like learn to do, remember to do. Yeah, so it's like less instinct than something conscious.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I'm sure every writer has things that they're just like it's kind of there from the beginning, and
Mm-hmm.
then they have and like other things you have to like remember. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'm trying to keep things grounded and like finding different ways to keep myself from getting too much into a character's thoughts.
Always appreciate it because you really just again make the world very vivid through that. It's just like it's
Thank you.
so vivid, and I think that's what I love about it. You know?
You know what I can't ever see is interior spaces. Like I couldn't unless I'm literally I'm always setting scenes just in my parents' house
Yeah.
because like I don't remember what anything else looks like.
Yeah.
Or I'll like Google like foyer of house. Like for some reason I'm like, how do stairs work? Like unless it's right in front of me.
Yes.
So that I was on a panel with an author who said I do not see faces. Like I can't hold a face in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't hold a room in my head. So it's just
Yes.
brains are like weird and you don't know how different yours is until you talk to people.
Mine is clothing.
Okay. You
I
can't see
can't.
clothing.
I will describe clothing all day, and I'm like, I have no idea. You're kind of wearing like this thing. It's like flowy, and
Your
like,
legs are covered in a fabric. They're like,
yeah,
your
a fabric. I'm like, it was a dress,
pants?
and that's
It
like
was a
for me.
tube of
Yeah,
cloth. Yeah.
there was the private bits were covered. Congratulations.
This is not
The end.
spicy. I
Yes.
need to simplify. No,
The
that's
end. And quickly to wrap up this section so that we can go into fun section before I like keep you here forever because I can keep going forever.
I got my tea. I'm comfortable.
Good, as long as we're with our tea same, so I'm like at least hydrated. I absolutely love because you write YA, and there's this thing sometimes with YA. I'm obsessed with YA, but there's this thing sometimes where authors I feel are afraid to make their characters, especially their protagonists, too flawed.
Okay.
Especially to give them like real flaws. You know, like not the whole like what my biggest flaw is that I care too much flaw. Like I mean like you know
flaws.
yeah like I
Work
just
too hard. Yeah.
like that vibe. But you have characters that are legitimately flawed. You have in the bad ones your protagonist is a liar. In the Hazel Woods, your character is quick to anger. You have characters that have these flaws that would normally make them hard to connect with, because normally those are flaws that you're like, like, I can't connect to you as a good person, because why would you be a good person? You're a liar. Why would you be a good person? You, like, get so angry you say things, like, that are horrible, you know? And yet, you sort of lean into those flaws, and your characters are still, I find them likable and relatable, regardless of the fact that they have these characteristics that you lean into. And I want to know sort of that balance when you're writing those characters.
Okay, so we were talking earlier about how I used to be the interviewer for the BNNY podcast, which is very fun. And there was something.
Great job, by the way.
I love that. There was something Holly Black said when I interviewed her. It was like around The Cruel Prince, I think. And she was saying, like, you can forgive, like, a murderer. You can forgive a person with all, like, this, like, you forgive Carden, like, for all that he's done, right? But if a character is revealed to be, like, a bad tipper, like, you will never.
Yes.
Or, like, if they're just, like, kind of a dick to, I don't know. You have to be, like, a huge asshole. You can't be a little asshole. So, I think there's, like, a spectrum of unlikability. And you kind of have to go a little hard to get away with it. You know, like, if you go too small, your character's just irritating and I don't know. It's something I think about later, not when I'm writing. I remember, you know, being told, like, for the first time, like, you're an unlikable heroine, and I'm like, what?
They kind of are, but they're not. They're not unlikable, but they should be. You know, like.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's been such a long time since I've cared about likability myself. Unless, again, a bad tipper. I'm like, I'm not reading a protagonist who doesn't tip. So it's hard for me to even connect anymore with the mentality of someone who would, like, put a book down because they wouldn't want to be friends with the protagonist.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like every author is going to lose readers because of things they can't or won't or wouldn't even think of doing. And, you know, I'm just always going to have a segment of people who just whatever I'm selling, they're not buying.
Yes.
So yeah, I think the level of likability is something that I can move the dial a little, but
Hmm.
it's never going to go too far.
They're never gonna kick a puppy, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and nor are they going to be like cookie baskets for everyone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's like a little
Yeah.
an area of person that I'm interested in, like a
Yeah.
level of flaw
Hmm.
that I'm going to want to play with in like different
Yeah.
ways.
Especially because I think your characters, they know that they're flawed and they want to be good people,
Yeah.
but it's almost like they can't, like, it's like, ah, dang it, I did it again. Like,
Yeah, or like want to be good people for 1 to 2 people.
Yes.
Like not for the world,
No.
but for like someone they care for. And I
Yeah,
think
they're not everyone's cup of tea, but they're
yeah,
for the people that they are, they're loyal to them.
much like novels, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Is there one character or one book that you found it the hardest or easiest to write, especially with, like, having these?
Dana in Our Crooked Hearts, the mom in 90
Really?
Chicago, just whoosh. That, because when I was writing it, I thought I was writing like background.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, just typing
Yeah.
like that cat meme, do, do, do,
Yeah.
do, with like a little keyboard.
Uh-huh.
It was a keyboard cat. And then I was like, oh, this is part of the book. Yes, I have so many more words than I thought I did.
Yeah.
So yeah, she is the closest I've come. Sometimes, again, I would interview an author who'd be like, this idea came out of me in a flood and I wrote it in 2 months. And I'd be sitting there green with envy.
Well,
The
yes, I
closest,
can
the
never.
closest I've come. No.
No. We're gonna move on to a fun little sort of miscellaneous
Okay.
little section. English,
I'm
escape me
ready.
for a
I'm
hot
ready.
second.
Name TBD. I'm ready.
Yes, name TBD. I call it the bookish, miscellaneous bookish, miscellaneously bookish. I am working on it. Okay, so first of all, I must know: do you get scared of your own stories?
Never. Never.
Never.
No. Yeah, in fact, I didn't know that there was a scary component
Mhm.
until readers were like, "Oh, this like," and then I was kind of excited.
Yeah.
I guess it's like you can't tickle yourself. So no.
Yes, yes, that's true. I wasn't scared. Don't worry. I also want to point out you mentioned you said this earlier, and I almost had the question then. Because you talk about fandoms.
Yeah.
You mentioned Harry Potter quite a bit, and as
In
a
Hazel
Harry
Wood.
Potter fan, that
Mhm.
I actually started reading and writing, and all of this is 100% Harry Potter. First of
Mhm.
all, very excited about that, and I don't know. I just wanted to point it out because I don't know if you sort of noticed that.
Yeah, definitely. In the Hazelwood was my debut, and I
Yeah.
think there's definitely 2 to 5. Yeah.
I should have
Yeah.
kept a tally.
Yeah. But as far as like my own fandoms, like for fan fiction, I would
Mhm.
say because I'm a little older, Bruce Coville's Magic Shop.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's what
like
inspired the magic vibe in your stories then?
I would say, well, as far as like being a young writer, trying to write like someone
Yeah.
or doing like almost explicitly fan fiction, it was Bruce Coville's Magic Shop, Francesca Lia Block's Vibe,
Mm-hmm.
and then Choose Your Own Adventure. So I definitely I wrote my own Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yes.
And I've looked back at them and like they're trippy. I was like, really, kids who read a lot, their minds are interesting places because there's just
Yes.
all sorts of stuff in there.
Imagination is crazy. I could be left alone and entertain myself when I had to go with my mom to run errands back before there were cell phones everywhere. And like you would just be like, I was like that kid that was just
Oh,
like,
you would just be like thinking,
yeah,
that's
like,
so cute. Oh, I love it.
and I think I creeped people out because I was just like
Little did they know what was happening.
coming up with whole
And
stories.
your innocent face,
Yeah.
yeah.
So then would it be fair to ask like what house you would put, like for Harry Potter house, what house you would put some of your characters in? Like your
You know-
protagonist at least.
Yeah, Hufflepuff.
Hufflepuff.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what you are?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm a
definitely.
Ravenclaw.
I think most,
With a
yeah,
Hufflepuff
like most.
Rising.
What's that?
With a Hufflepuff rising. Ravenclaw with a Hufflepuff
Okay.
rising.
I really like that. I don't know anything about astrology at all. I think that's an astrology reference.
It's an astrology reference, but I don't know
Okay.
anything about it. I'm just like, I can tie it back to Harry Potter. Okay, yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah, oddly, astrology is like one area of magic that you would think would be in my wheelhouse.
Yeah,
It is not, for some reason.
yeah. Would you though? Would you be like, let's explore that?
No. But if someone wanted to be like, I made you like a star chart, I'd be like, oh, that's like interesting. How does that work?
Yes.
But for some reason, it's never been like an area that I've dug into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like love it, but I don't know it. All I know is that every time I tell people I'm a Scorpio, they go, "Oh," and I'm like,
Okay. When I
what?
tell people I'm a Leo, they're like, hmm. I think I'm like an
So, yeah.
maybe my disinterest started with the fact that I'm just like I'm not a Leo. Like
Yeah.
I'm like why like it's just I'm the proof that it's
Mhm.
just not there's not a connection between myself and like the star sign.
Well, I've been told I had like two separate occasions, like two or three friends do my chart,
Okay.
and they'll like look at it because they'll say the same thing. I'm like, I'm a Scorpio. They're like, huh, and they'll
Um,
like look at it and they'll see like my moon, star, sun, rising adjacent to, I don't know, and they're like they look at like the other parts and they're like, that
they're
explains why
like,
you don't act like a
okay.
Scorpion. I'm like, okay. I don't know what
I love
that
that. Yeah,
is,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they're like, that explains it. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm glad that somebody understands.
I
Like,
like I like tarot and I like seeing
yes.
people be like, okay, like here's how this connects, da 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 da. I think
Hmm.
that's kind of fun. So
Yeah, I love tarot cards. It's been a minute since I've had mine
I
read, but
love like a
yeah,
beautiful deck. Yeah.
yes. I have beautiful decks. I just don't know how
How
to
to do it.
properly.
Yeah.
Yes, how to probably do it. Um, so I want to know if you also had any favorite fairy tales growing up.
Definitely growing up, my favorite was 12 Dancing Princesses.
Okay.
And I think about it now, it is wild. It's like a tale within a tale. Like
Yeah.
there's a doorway to hell. Like what is happening? There's a doorway to a whole nother world
Yes.
inside a palace. And it's
Yes.
like a world within a world. And I just love how it just hangs out there unexplained.
Mhm.
The visuals are impeccable. Like the three groves that the princesses move through. Like I will never forget. And like the Silver Lake. It's
Yeah.
one that I tell to my son. He has like there's like a small catalog of tales I'm like allowed to tell him, and he's very choosy about
Mhm.
what I can bring in. And it's wonderful seeing which bits he responds to. So there's like things I'll say every time, and then things I'll change every time.
Yeah.
And sometimes he'll be like, "You forgot about the part where the littlest princess says da 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 da." So it's just fun. It's like the oral tradition, like seeing what
Mhm.
he holds onto as canon and what I'm allowed to mess with. Um,
Yeah.
and then as a grown up, I came to really appreciate the juniper tree because it's scary as hell. It has a fairy tale rhyme in it, which, if you've read the Hazelwood, you'll know I'm like a sucker for that. And it is like two or three tale types mashed together.
Mhm.
Like it starts Snow White and then it like ends something totally different. And it also features a character kind of going mad. And
Uh-huh.
usually with fairy tales, there's not like depth psychologically. It's like very flat,
Mhm.
but it shows like on the page kind of a woman's psychological unraveling. Um, it's a great tale.
What about goddesses? Do you have a
Ooh,
favorite goddess?
so I was obsessed with Edith Hamilton's mythology, and
Uh-huh.
rereading it now, I got the beautiful edition that's actually illustrated by Jim Tierney, who has done all of my book covers. You should definitely pick it up.
Yeah.
Um, I forgot how many myths share ground with fairy tale.
Mhm.
Like East of the Sun, West of the Moon is very much is it Eros and Psyche, I think. So that's one of my favorite tales, and I love how those combine,
Yeah.
or rather share ground. I've always loved Hades and Persephone.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
irresistible. Yeah, I'm.
Yeah. And I've always loved it because Persephone sounds like Stephanie.
Oh my God, that's funny. I also love that.
Yes.
um, I love Artemis, and her
Mm,
Wild Hunt, definitely. Like, again, with the fairy tale overlap, Artemis's Wild Hunt, the Wild Hunt of like fairies, I
mhm.
don't know. I love those like commonalities where religion and storytelling and paganism and like everything kind of
Yes.
lives together. Everyone loves a good story, and it's expressed across so many parts of our lives. I find that really interesting.
I want to also know of all the magic systems that you've written about,
Yeah.
which world would you live in? Like,
Oh,
which
God.
magic or would you pick up?
I would be a red shirt. Like in any magical world, I would die instantly. Like at best, I remember like when Game of Thrones came out, my husband and I were joking. I'm like, I would be like a nameless wench.
Yes.
He'd be like the guy who stumbles into the forest to pee, and then like a White Walker gets him. Like nobody. No, it's like when people fantasize about living in the Regency era. It's like you
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah.
be Elizabeth Bennet. You would be slopping out her chamber pot. Like,
Absolutely. Not only that, but I would 100%. I feel like I would just die. Like
oh,
I get a cold every time it's cold, and I get like a really bad cold. I get really bad allergies, and I'm like,
yeah.
I'm just
And when I'm cold, I just go, I'm cold every 11 seconds. Like,
yes.
someone wants to hear that. Um, of my worlds, I certainly wouldn't live in the hinterland. That would be a prompt way to die.
Very quickly, yes.
Let's see. I guess it would be cool to live in the world of our Crooked Hearts
Hmm.
because I do still want like craft of some kind to be real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't, that magic wasn't all bad.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
could
Theoretically, you could just, you
mess with
know,
the proper forces to the proper degree.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Which I'd be
Theoretically, you
very
could
good
keep it
steward
nice.
of magic.
Yeah.
Someone should test me. I'd be good at it.
I also, I feel like because everything is so creepy, and again, I've told you like some of the friendships give me like Jennifer Body's vibe. The sometimes I get like very Stranger Things vibe. I definitely think this could be any one of your stories could be a movie or a TV show. I
Mhm.
want to know if you've ever thought about like, yes, this one would be turned, and if you have any actors that you're like, and this
Ooh.
person would play my people.
Well, I feel like when you're a debut novelist, it's impossible to resist the
Yeah,
lure of fantasy casting.
yeah, like one day
So
they're
I
gonna
thought
tell
Carrie
me.
Brownstein would be a great Ella from Sleater.
Mm.
Um, and I thought for Alice, oh no, this actress whose name is going to escape me, but oh, she was in like an awesome graphic novel adaptation, Sophie something. She played the younger version of Amy Adams in Dark Places. No, Sharp Objects.
Oh.
She's amazing.
Okay, yes, I am blanking on the name as well, though.
Yeah, I love her. So she would be a fabulous Alice.
Mhm.
As far as what I mean, like they should all be adapted, right?
All of them. Yeah, yeah, call me up right now.
I want. My phone lines are open.
Yeah.
So hopefully, one day, that'd be a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
I think that it definitely does give it, like, because it's so spooky, I definitely can see it being at least, like, a mini series or a movie or something like that.
I
Like,
mean, 6 seasons in a movie. I've
that's,
heard
I
some
mean,
people.
isn't that too hard to ask? Like, really? Like, call me up. um, and then I want to know also, because I heard you were a journalist before
Oh,
this.
yeah. Hmm.
And I'm a journalist. I don't know if you know this.
I
I've been a
do.
journalist for like
So,
10
yes.
years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I want to know if being a journalist sort of, whether in a good way or a bad way, sort of, not inspired, but sort of, we're gonna go for inspired because English is escaping me right now, but inspired the kind of author you are.
Respect for deadlines, definitely.
Hmm.
Although, deadlines can get a little fuzzy with
Yes.
whole novels.
Hmm.
um, Judicious cutting, like
Like
figuring out,
heartless, like editing.
yeah, like being like, well, this is 1,000 words, but my editor asked for 600.
Yeah.
So just like within a tight piece of text, making it tighter.
Yes.
I find that really satisfying. I kind of love that, like late in the game edit. I just a love of being allowed in the wake of journalism, being allowed to make stuff up entirely. I find that so relaxing.
I totally get that. I totally get that.
And just like the confidence to when I started doing journalism, this is in Chicago. Mostly I did arts journalism, mostly books and theater
Mm-hmm.
reviews, and then some like full-length arts and community reporting. Um, so like just learning how to talk to people made me like braver, I guess. And although that maybe doesn't inform my life as an author, as a writer that much, as an author, it's helpful
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have a conversation without being shy and nervous, which, I've definitely going to journalism in my mid 20s, I would absolutely characterize myself as like quite introverted.
Yeah.
So it taught me how to put like the extroverted part of myself forward as needed.
I totally understand exactly that because I think journalism also had to like it like forced me also to bring out that side because that little reader child of me, I was just like, no, I don't want to speak to anyone
Yeah,
except if they're in my head.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
nobody else.
Except if you live in this book.
Yes, and that's it. And finally, I want to play a quick game of this or that. The book.
Okay.
Okay, this or that. Scary or mystery?
Hmm. Oh no. I thought it'd be quick. Oh, mystery, I guess. If I can't combine them.
Witches or goddesses?
Witches. Sorry, bad ones. I'd have both if I could.
Okay, so then in that case, witches or fairy tales?
Oh no. I feel like you're making me I'm not I'm not ordering my books in order of how much I love them. But simply as concepts I would explore
Yeah,
again, fairy tales.
fairy tales. And fairy tales are goddesses? Or gods in general?
I mean fairy tales,
Fairy
The
tales.
first thing you
Hmm.
write about is often like the thing you love with the most ferocity. I
Yeah.
am guessing. At least in my case.
Disconnected mom and daughter duo or codependent friendships?
Codependent friendships. I should mention I have a lovely mom and we're very close.
Sorry, mom.
I just should put that out there in the mom section of the chat.
Standalone or series?
Standalone.
Which you don't get a lot in fantasy, and I'm guilty of that as well.
I love a good standalone. But you're
Mm-hmm.
right, fantasy it is hard to find.
Yeah. Small town lore or big city rumors?
Ooh. This is, I mean, I've written, all these are all things I love, so it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to order them. I guess I live in a city now, so we'll go with the city one.
The city. Would you rather keep a secret or have a secret kept from you?
Ooh, keep a secret.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a good
And
secret keeper. Everyone should tell me their secrets.
I won't tell anyone, don't worry. And that's actually it for that game. And finally, the last question of the day. I hear, and let me know if this is true, that you are possibly dipping into the adult space. Is that true? Is that your
Yeah.
next project?
Yeah, I'm drafting something now that I hope will be my adult debut. I'm choosing this time to not sell on proposal, so I'm like writing the whole thing, figuring out what it is before I sell it. So I'm having the joyful experience of kind of figuring it out on my own timeline. And I'm really, really excited about it. I can't say too much, of course, because it's not finished or sold, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of the things we talked about. So, like invented pop culture, complex family relationships, real world with like speculative magical elements, fandom, magic books, all that
Yeah.
stuff.
All the good stuff.
All the good stuff,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can't wait to read it. I can't wait for you to have
Oh, thank you.
that out. Then we can know more about it.
Thank you so much.
That was my last and final question. So unless you want to say something that I didn't ask, and you just want to let the audience know.
No, just thank you so much for having me, Stephanie, and thank you to anyone who took the time to listen to our chat. It was so much fun, and I'm really, really excited about the nerd tea. So thank you for making me one of your early guests.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much. It was such a lovely chat. Like, you made it so easy to chat with you. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And that was it for this episode of The Nerd Tea. Thank you, everyone.